All right, let's say our La'asok B'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, rule the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and command us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So we're talking about Baruch She'amar. This is a prayer that is in the morning service, weekdays, Shabbat, festivals, and high holidays. It is fairly early on in the morning service at the beginning of a warm-up section called Psukei Zimra. We do this, then we do some psalms and other biblical quotes. Then we say Yishtabach, which is another prayer saying that we were going to praise you, we did praise you, now we have praised you. This prayer developed because in the year 200 or so, when the Mishnah was written, there were people who felt like they couldn't just jump straight into prayer, which at that point was only the Shema's blessings and the Amidah, as far as a regular morning prayer service went. They needed some time to transition themselves. And so they would say psalms. And over time, it was decided that that was a good idea. Everybody ought to do it. And we should put a blessing at the beginning of it and a blessing at the end of it, much like we do with the set of psalms we say for Hallel. So the prayer Baruch She'amar was added at the beginning. The prayer Yishtabach was added at the end. So that would be bookended with blessings. And by the 900s, we know that Baruch She'amar was in place, with some changes in the original wording, but basically as it is now. We say Baruch She'amar standing because this was where the communal service began once Baruch She'amar and Psukei Zimra, these psalms, were added. So people might have said other prayers on their own, but they came together to do Baruch She'amar. In some synagogues, that is still the case. And there is a custom to gather the front tzitzit of your tallis when you say this prayer and then kiss them at the end. The idea is that you're symbolically combining love and awe of God in your heart. Baruch She'amar is an important prayer. It's important enough that if you have come late and you're trying to catch up, you can skip most of the prayers, but this is one of the few that you ought to say. It comes in two parts, as we'll see when we look at the text itself. The first part has 10 baruchs or so. And because the first line says, blessed or praised is the one who spoke and the world came into being, these 10 baruchs are meant to reflect the 10 times or so that in the first chapter of Genesis, the word Vayomer, and God spoke, is used. So God spoke 10-ish times, therefore we have these 10 baruchs-ish, 10-ish baruchs in the first half of this prayer. And then the second half is a blessing, a long form blessing. Short form blessings are where you say just the beginning formula, Baruch Atah Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, and then a couple words. Long form blessings often will start with, again, the Baruch Atah formula, but either way, they will have a Baruch Atah at the end. Questions about all of that before we dive into looking at the prayer itself? Okay. So in that case, we're going to read the text and then discuss it. Tybal, would you be willing to read this text, please?
Praise it is the one who spoke and the world came into being. Praise it is God. Praised is the one who makes creation. Praised is the one who says and does. Praised is the one who decrees and fulfills. Praised is the one who has mercy on the earth. Praised is the one who has mercy on those that are created. Praised is the one who pays a good reward to those who fear God. Praised is the one who lives forever and exists eternally. Praised is the one who redeems and saves. Praised is God's name.
In the second half, please.
Praised are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, God, compassionate parent, extolled by the mouth of God's people, praised and glorified by the tongue of God's devoted ones and those who serve the Lord. With the songs of your servant David, we will praise
Typo.
The tense. Praised you, O Lord our God. With praises and psalms, we will magnify and praise you, glorify you, speak your name, and proclaim your sovereignty, our ruler, our God. The only one, giver of life to the worlds, the sovereign whose great name is praised and glorified to all eternity. Blessed are you, Lord, the sovereign extolled with songs of praise.
Thank you. All right, before we get into the questions, are there thoughts, reactions, personal connections that you want to make to the last two paragraphs?
David?
Yeah.
I want to know, given your father, the cantor, you were at shul all the time. When you were little, did you think that David was you?
No, because I didn't know Hebrew well enough to translate until I knew that this was talking about King David, and I will admit that I was too busy doing other things like reading Pirkei Avot, which is a much more interesting part of the Siddur. That I was not looking at the translation of these prayers when I was little. But it's a good question. Other questions, reactions, personal connections to the last two paragraphs? Okay, seeing none, I'll pose a question. So we're going to now go through the praised is the one who this and the praised is the one who that. And each one has a discussion question. So praised is the one who spoke and the world came into being. God created a world through speech. When has somebody's words changed your world? And you can respond out loud. You can respond in the chat to everybody, or you can respond in the chat to just me. And if you want, I will read it out loud, or I can in your name or anonymously, or not at all. That is a general comment in this class. When has somebody's words changed your world?
Did you say somebody, David, or God?
I mean, it could be God. We can amend it to someone.
Okay.
But God has no body.
But it could be somebody else.
It could also be a human, yes.
I think when the obstetrician said to me, it's a boy.
Very good.
Seriously, shocked, and I would have been happy with the girl too, but just that having that moment.
It's
Well, maybe going along with that, when Cantor Silverman from Mount Shaman, who married me and Howard, pronounced us husband and wife, that changed my world, definitely.
good.
Hey, David,
Yeah,
can I go dark?
go for it.
Well, when and I still can't get over how I was told, because of immune things, I'm sheltering at home. And when my spouse, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, oh no, maybe I shouldn't do this. Never mind.
Okay. I will trust your judgment.
We'll chat privately.
Yeah, we've got a couple comments in the chat. Zoya wrote, when Evan asked me to marry him 20 years ago. Sheila wrote, criticisms seem to have stuck with me through the years versus praises. I was a child drum student and an uncle-in-law criticized my ability. Joseph wrote, Rabbi Gould, when in the mikveh, he told me that I was connected to every Jewish person, past, present, and in the future. And Diane commented on presumably one of these. Funny how that works, isn't it?
Well, when my wife said hello to me for the first time, when I first met her, it changed a lot of things. Sure.
Yeah. All right, question 2. Praise is the one who makes creation. This is in the present tense, implying that God remakes the world every day. The morning prayers before Ahava Rabbah make this point also. That means that every day you get a new chance, a new day when you haven't made any mistakes yet. When have you had a fresh start?
I've lost count. So many things change. Started so many different things. Because sometimes because of somebody else's word or somebody else saying something.
Literally, well, every day, but also if we think about our, annual cycle after Yom Kippur, after the Ne'ilah, we have kind of this fresh start where we're cleansed and hopefully have had some time to think about how we can, be different in the in the new year. I think that we have a lot of those moments that are embedded daily or also kind of with each holiday, but I think that's probably the pinnacle of of our yearly journey.
Mm.
Or some people, are also thinking about when they're going to eat, but whatever it might be.
I'll tell you a story about my wife who was driving one day and she wasn't in a particularly good mood. And as she was driving, there was an African-American man who was standing in the street and she was, I guess, waiting at a light. And he came up to her and he said, don't worry, no violence. I just want to tell you that that God woke you up today, and he doesn't wake everybody up. And that kind of changed her perception from that time on.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I don't know if this is seem a little silly or not, but this actually kind of did change me. There used to be a television program on called Joan of Arcadia, and it wasn't based on any particular religion. It was just, you know, and God was in it. I don't know. It seems like nobody saw it but me, so I'm sure nobody on this call ever saw it. And it obviously went off the air. So anyway, but there was very, very beginning in one of the first episodes when God spoke to Joan. He was in human form like her, and she was like, oh yeah, like really, you're God. Yeah, sure. And she goes, okay, if you're God, do a miracle. Let me see a miracle. And he pointed, they were in a field, and he pointed at a tree and he goes, there's a miracle. And she said, it's a tree. And he said, yeah, let's see you make one. And, you know, I really liked that. I liked the show in general because it had some witticisms like that. But I liked that because I realized watching that yes, you know, the Bible says creation is a miracle, or creation is this wonderful thing, but you don't think about it because it's a tree, it's a rose, you know, it's a body of water, big deal. But if you think about it, it truly is like awesome. And that particular program changed my perspective when I think about nature and I think about God's hand in the world, even with simple things like that, that this is a showcase of God and his power and his creativeness.
And just think about it, we're surrounded by it continually.
Exactly. And it's a continual reminder if we keep our eyes and hearts open to that.
All right. All right, next question. So, this is a combination of the next two. Praise is the one who says and does. Praise is the one who decrees and fulfills. This particular phrasing comes from the Talmud, and it is a neutral and a stern version of the same thing. God keeps the divine promise even when people don't seem to deserve it, such as God made a promise to David that his line would continue to be ruling in Jerusalem. And so throughout the book of Kings, there are a number of David's descendants who don't make good choices. And yet the text says God kept the dynasty going because God made this promise to David. On the other hand, with God who decrees and fulfills, God follows through on punishment, unless there's sincere repentance, like in the Jonah story. So my question for you is, when did somebody not follow through on what they said they were going to do, and how did that feel?
I don't mean to be chatty, Kathy, but this just happened literally yesterday. So I have a good girlfriend who lives in Indiana. And so yesterday was the second time this happened in a row where I had contacted her on Friday. I said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, like brainstorm something, a decision that I had to make. And she and her husband were out at a something, and she said, I'll call you when I get home. And this was Friday. And so yesterday I and the first time that it happened, like a month or so ago, she forgot to call me back. And so I texted her yesterday and I said, I guess she forgot to call me back a second time because she never called me. And it turns out they had a lot of stuff going on, but I can tell you that it you really kind of feel, well, like chopped liver.
Right.
You're saying this is supposed to be a really good friend of mine, and I don't know that I want to be hurt, but I mean, and I'm glad I texted her because then I got the backstory. But you're hurt. You're like, what? Does she not like me anymore? And all that sort of stuff. So that it just happened. So there you go.
Okay, I have a story, an interesting one. The state of Israel, I think the IDF invited my neighbor to go to Israel to train members of the IDF. And he was going to take me with him, and I was just so excited. But and I would go downstairs to him every day and check with him, are we going? Are we going? And finally he said the state and the IDF went back on that promise. We never ended up going.
Frustrating. Other stories? All right, let's go on to the next question. So, praise is the one who has mercy on the earth. What is something that you can do to have mercy on the earth?
Recycle. Ah, I was just about to type that. Thank you. Who said that?
Naomi.
Naomi? Good job, Naomi.
Yeah.
I come from a city that does recycle about 70% of their trash.
I was just close to typing that word. Good job. You read my mind.
You could get your electricity from solar energy.
Good. How about trying to bring some sanity to peoples of the world?
Not more
It's not more
trees.
cynical. It was more cynical than I thought. I'm sorry.
It's hard to dress it up.
Zoya wrote, Tu B'Shvat is coming, so something about the trees.
I'm a member of the Arbor Day Foundation.
Wow.
Plant trees, help save the
Scott.
world.
God, that's good. It's a good activity.
My nephew was the president of it for many years, so I have a connection.
There's a great commercial on the radio while you remind me that they say that the best time to plant a certain tree, an oak tree or something, was 10 years ago. The next best time to plant it is today. So keep up your activity. It sounds good.
I remember when I was in Hebrew school, we used to buy stamps to plant trees in Israel.
Mhm.
I just
Right.
wonder if anybody ever went to check on our trees.
Well, I had some trees planted several times for many reasons, and they're there.
I planted lots of trees that way, Morris, but I don't know if I mean, I've been to Israel 4 times. I don't ever remember seeing a sign that says this is enormous tree.
No, but it's out there. There's areas, if you remember from your visits to Israel, many areas that were reclaimed that are now green rather than desert.
It's called the Green Line.
Oh, let's not get into that type of green, please.
No, it was trees. It was trees that were planted and
Oh.
along the border, and it made, you could tell where the border was because of it was green on the side of Israel.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's another way to establish the borders of the country if you can't populate it.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure.
There was another comment in the chat from Sheila about not wasting food as a way to have mercy on the earth.
Do not waste, period, I would add to that.
Got to walk a careful line to consume the food that's available, so it doesn't go to waste. The healthy stuff that is.
All right, next question. Praised is the one who has mercy on those who are created. According to the rabbis, God created the world with both justice and mercy so that the world could survive. This is from a midrash from Genesis Rabbah. When did somebody have mercy on you, or when did you have mercy on someone else?
The policeman in Oak Park once who stopped me for speeding and didn't give me a ticket because I lived here, he said he would give me a break. This was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That was merciful.
That counts.
So Norma, did that mean you didn't speed again?
What?
Did that mean that you didn't speed again in the neighborhood?
You're darn right.
Well,
In fact, I was going to the synagogue too. And I thought from now on, I drive the speed limit. Because I don't want any tickets on my name, on my record.
More important, be careful. Get there safely.
It's important.
You're a value to your community.
well, every time we make a donation to some charitable organization or help feed somebody, or
Oh, that's right.
that's one way of having mercy.
Definitely.
So many people get hungry or don't have clothes. There's a need out there for sure.
When we do the Jewish thing and give people the benefit of the doubt
Mm-hmm.
and try to come up with alternate scenarios in which, oh, was it Diane who just told the story about the friend in Indiana?
Right. Yes.
So then maybe just thinking of all the reasons why someone might not have called other than forgetting you.
Well, and that's what ultimately happened, because she felt really badly and she's like, "Oh, I'll talk to you right away." And I told her, I said, "You know what? Let's just let it go. And I'd just rather forget about it and, just let it go and that sort of thing." And as it turned out, then I learned she had all this other stuff going on, and it actually became something I think that brought us a little closer together, oddly enough. So.
So Mercy had positive results for you as well.
I can't help you women out with this one unless you are so inclined, but I've been following a habit of my own for many years now, actually. About when I finish putting on my tefillin, when I finish my last tefillah, when I wrap the strap around my hand, I say, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." It's not written there, it's not printed there, but I make a point of saying it there. And I think it's the right place to put it for me. And it helps me focus on the day that way. And I try to keep my fellow person in mind.
Nice. And as a note of clarification, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha comes from the book of Leviticus, 1918, and it means love your neighbor as yourself. Right. So Barry's suggestion of coming up with a ritual time to say that, that you can build into your routine, can help put us in the mindset to be thinking about that as we interact with other people and interpret their actions throughout the day.
For what it's worth, it helps me. Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm. The power of words is what this whole prayer is about.
David, the other part of that, I heard in a class recently, I should have looked it up, is love your neighbor as you love yourself. I guess the focus that is sometimes lost is the loving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So having mercy on yourself, right? Like not beating yourself up because, I don't know, you you burnt your dinner, or maybe responded in a not unkind way to someone at work, or I don't know, I feel like that's also important here, the mercy that how we speak to ourselves.
There's a commercial on television I've seen a few times. It's a Christian church. I don't know what denomination, but he made a statement the other day that was so meaningful. And what he said was, the most important words in the world are love yourself, along with what you said, Alex.
All right, next question. Praise is the one who pays a good reward. So in Pirkei Avot, which is a collection of quotes from the rabbis, finished around the year 200 CE, we are taught that we shouldn't serve God expecting a reward. And later on in Pirkei Avot, we are taught that God can be counted on to reward us for doing the right thing. Sometimes the reward comes in this world, sometimes it comes in the afterlife. When did you do the right thing without expecting a reward and receive one anyway?
Okay, so apparently I am a chatty Cathy tonight.
We all take turns. It's fine.
Don't change your name, please.
We all have our moments. So, I used to have a neighbor that lived down the hall from me. She's the one I've mentioned before. She was like my second mother. And the way that relationship developed was she was in her 90s and she had one good eye, and she needed to put salve into her eye, and having only one eye, it was extremely difficult for her to do that. And so she asked me if I would do that for her, and she was very apologetic. And I have to be really honest, a lot of those things don't bother me. It really it wasn't a big deal to me to do it, but I said, no problem, sure. And, I'm just down the hall. So I would do it for her, every night before she went to bed. That's when it was supposed to happen. And that action ended up as the genesis for creating our very, very close relationship, and really cemented. I mean, it was the beginning, and I think it was a very significant moment for her to have somebody do that for her, without complaining and all this other sort of stuff. And it just brought us together. So I kind of did it just to help my neighbor out, and the reward that I got in return was just getting to know and to truly love and be loved by a fantastic person.
May I add a different spin?
Sure.
As opposed to relating a circumstance where I did something and got an unexpected reward, I'm going to flip it with the spin about for me that's been on my mind off and on regularly over the last, since COVID, more intensely since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, there's a Rashi commentary at the point that we're going to have coming to us when we read the Ten Commandments and or the attributes of God. And there's a point where we're told that God rewards to the 2000th generation, is the English translation's comment, and God punishes the unfaithful, who remain continuously unfaithful without doing tshuva, to the third or fourth generation. And Rashi makes a fraction, and he takes 2000 as the 2000th generation as his numerator, and he makes 4 generations of punishment as the denominator. And so the fraction is 2000 in the numerator, 4 in the denominator. And Rashi says, and this is indicative of how God magnifies his reward, magnifies the reward to people for walking in God's ways versus the people who don't. And I've been looking at my life intensely since COVID, more intensely than before. And I look at my challenges and I see that God has been, some of my challenges have been harsh, but they've been fair. So God has punished me fairly, and God has blessed me along the way, and those blessings are magnified. And so that's my flip side, but related to the concept that when I get rewarded magnification. And when I get challenged measure for measure, if you want to call it that. And that's our God to me, and that's the life I live.
Thank you. Okay, other times?
When I have a comment. When my oldest granddaughter was born the day before Thanksgiving, and because of that, I hopped on a plane Thanksgiving Day. It was a United flight to Chicago. And before I got on the plane, I bought a box of candy. And as I got on the plane, I handed it to the flight attendant. And I said, "This is a thank you to the crew. Because you're working today on Thanksgiving, I get to go and see my first grandchild who was born yesterday." Half an hour before the flight landed, one of the flight attendants appeared at my side with a bottle of wine from first class wrapped in a white napkin, cloth napkin, with a note on it that said, "Congratulations on becoming a grandmother, and thank you from the
Aw.
crew."
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
So
this is-
I did
that's touching.
something good and I was rewarded.
Oh, cool.
Point
I
made.
didn't expect it, I just,
It's a great story.
the guy who was
Amazing.
sitting next to me said, "How did you do that?"
Oh, that's really nice.
Point made,
22
Nancy.
years ago.
If I could shift to just daily wonders. I've been in Chicago for a year and a half now, having lived in suburbs for way too many decades. So I do a lot more walking, and I encounter a lot more people on the street who are, shall we say, quite willing to accept a little help. So I make sure that if it's not Shabbat, I have a single dollar bill in each of several pockets so that I can just reach in and find the dollar bill. And I've discovered that the simple act of putting the dollar in the person's hand, holding the hand for the extra 3 seconds, making eye contact if possible, and saying, "God bless you," starts as, well, gee, maybe I'll be a little generous today, but I find that I am transformed by it. Because instead of living in a world of scarcity, all of a sudden I'm living in a world of abundance. And I realize that dollar, I can spare that dollar. And it's not that the dollar is going to change the person's life, but the interaction and the gesture of giving, I find I'm receiving a lot more than I'm giving.
Oh,
And just to flog a dead horse, the notion that you can't see God, our God is invisible. We don't have statues and icons. So, I forget which sage taught it. You want to see God? Look for God's image. Where's God's image? In every human face. So that extra second is finding that Tselem Elohim, that image of God, and saying, I can put a dollar in the hand of this image of God, and whatever the reaction is, I feel like, I just got a very powerful blessing, and it only cost me $1.
All right, next question. All right. Praise is the one who lives forever. God's foreverness is also referred to in the prayer Adon Olam. Well, God lives forever, people don't. When did having a limited amount of time force you to accomplish something important?
And I studied for my bat mitzvah.
for me, it's getting up in the morning, getting my buns in order, and getting ready so that some good friend of mine who's kindly enough to pick me up and drive me to shul provides me an opportunity to help make a minyan. And time is fleeting, but the reward is so great. Thank you, sir.
All right, speaking of time being fleeting, I'll move on to the next question. Praise is the one who redeems and saves. God redeemed us in Egypt, saving us at the Sea of Reeds. That's what we read last week in the Torah portion. When did somebody save you, or did you save someone else? And you can take this in all sorts of directions.
I have the story this time. I'll try to keep it brief, but relevant. I went out to visit a friend in a far western suburb on a rainy night. And I got there safely enough. But by the time I was coming home, I'm driving on the, I guess it was Interstate 88, that road that runs east and west. It was pouring rain and lots of puddles and cars. What is that called when you plane the tires
Hydroplaning.
hydroplaning, and I quite lost control of the car and slid off the road and came to a sudden stop when the hood of my car, the front radiator of my car hit a pole, and I bumped the steering wheel with my nose in just the right place that it was low enough to cause some bleeding and hurt, but just off enough that it didn't kill me, which it could have. And a stranger came along and took me to police station, waited for me. I went to an emergency room with him. He waited again. I got some quick and good attention, and he took me all the way home. Car still sitting back at that pole that I cracked into, but that was the least of my worries at that point. I asked for his name. He wouldn't give it to me. He wanted to be anonymous so that I couldn't find him and try to repay him. It was just something he wanted to do. And he did it. And he killed a night doing it, or he killed a late night doing it. And I'm amazed to this day that somebody saved my life. Well, God saved my life, and he saved me too.
All right, one more question.
I just
Yes, of
remember
course.
talking about that. My wife, we were in a remote area on the beach in Costa Rica, and my wife was beginning to miscarry, and it would have been fatal to try and drive her over the rough roads back. And I had to find a way to get her back to the capital of the city and decent medical attention as quickly as possible. And luckily, I rapidly caught on the side in the corner of my eye an airplane parked on a runway. That was the only way you could get in there, except on a bad road next to a resort, a good resort. And I was able to find quickly the pilots. And that was a reward because they said, yes, we'll take her right now. They didn't charge me anything. We flew in. It was only by flight. It might have been 20 minutes, half an hour, and had a taxi waiting. Take my wife to the clinic. And I was telling the story to my grandchildren at their mom's birthday. And I said, by doing that so quickly, you are here today, and we're all here. If not, your mom wouldn't be here. Neither would you. And so we're happy together. So that was somebody saved my life. We had to do it very quickly.
Thank you.
Sorry for making it so long.
These are good stories.
Must have felt
All
like
right.
an age.
So recognizing the time, I'm going to tell you the things that are left. Praise is the name of God. So a question about who has a good name and what about them caused them to have it. Sovereign extol with songs of praise. In your view, why should God be praised? A couple of observations about the second half of Baruch She'amar. So that the long form blessing, a couple of comments about that. From the book Entering Jewish Prayer by Reuven Hammer. Here's what he wrote about this prayer. And then there are different ways of chanting Baruch She'amar for weekday, for Shabbat, and for high holidays. And so I appreciate that my father has made videos on YouTube of how to do those. And then Craig Taubman also wrote a congregational melody, Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch. So you can see that video of him singing. Well, there's nothing to see, but you can listen to it. And then finally, if you'd like 40 something minutes of the history of Baruch She'amar, of which I have borrowed some of what he said, there is a class that somebody else gave, which you can find on YouTube, and it's, you know, akin to the sorts of classes that I do, except more in depth. So I brought his video with credit to him. So that brings us to time. I'm going to stop the recording